Re-releases and special editions of albums are pretty common. It's a way of reselling a favourite album while giving something new and interesting to the fans. You can have remasters, bonus tracks, or even a full-on remix of the original album to show a brand new side of the original. Sometimes they're a blessing, and sometimes less so. But they all provide something interesting, something worthy of scrutiny. My name is Michael, and across this series we will be looking at various remixes of famous albums and how they shed new light on the source material and even improve on it, or fail to live up to its expectations. This is the remix. In 2004, rock band and tangential result of 9/11 My Chemical Romance released 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge, their sophomore album. According to lead singer Gerard Way, it is a concept album, following the story of a dead man sent on a mission to collect 1,000 souls for the devil, in the hopes of being reunited with the woman he loves. This album is a staple of emo culture, spawning certified emo classics like Helena and I'm Not Okay, I Promise, and further cementing MCR as a force to be reckoned with after their first album I Brought You My Bullets, You Brought Me Your Love. It is also, at the moment, my favourite MCR record. In April of 2025, MCR announced that they would be releasing a deluxe edition of 3 Cheers for its 21st anniversary, roughly. With this edition came some bonus live recordings of songs from the album, as well as, you guessed it, a brand new mix of the record provided by Rich Costey. Oh, hello again, Richard. Nice to see you again after Origin of Symmetry. This news had, I must admit, completely passed me by when it was announced. I learned about this mix, in fact, on release night, and then promptly redid my schedule for my channel so I could talk about it. My second thought, however, was why? There was, in my mind, nothing particularly wrong with the original mix of the album. Is it grungy and rough around the edges? Yes, very. Compared to the comparative spit and polish of the mix of the Black Parade, it is very rough indeed. But I always felt this to be a feature, not a bug. Would a new mix defang the bite of the original, or would it improve the record, bringing it into the 2020s with an all-new coat of paint? Well, I'm happy to say this new mix is awesome. I wasn't sold on it at first, and I do still have some notes, but overall this is, in every technical level, a better mix that provides an interesting new look at this already fantastic record. Let's check it out. The first thing to note about this mix, one that you can tell visually if you look at the waveforms without even pressing play, is that it is a hell of a lot less brickwalled than its original counterpart. Michael, what the f*** is brickwalling? To explain this, I'm gonna have to blitz through the loudness war, a very silly period of history. In music, there's a thing called dynamic range, very simply the difference between the quietest and loudest parts of your song. With a well-balanced master, you will have a good dynamic range. However, when CDs became a thing, record companies became more interested in louder CDs. Unfortunately, there is a ceiling to how loud a digital song could be, so to push how loud an album could get, producers would run them through compressors to reduce dynamic range, making the difference between the quiet and loud parts smaller. This could then be amplified, increasing the perceived loudness of the recording. The trouble is, when you do this, you inherently trade off sound quality. The harder you crush the sound, the less detail you're going to have. I mean, just visually you can tell. Look at these waveforms. That's not healthy. Unfortunately, CDs from the 90s and early to mid 2000s are rife with this heavily compressed sound in favor of loudness, which means a lot of them have a flat, distorted sound to them. If you look at the waveform of one of these compressed tracks, they look like just a wall of sound, hence the name brickwalling. The original mix of 3 Cheers is, unfortunately, a victim of this loudness practice. But the good news is, the remix isn't. It's still mastered a bit loud, but there is a lot more dynamic range on this mix, which already puts us ahead of the original. Hell, even if they just re-released the original mix, but remastered it to be a lot quieter, bringing back some of the detail that had been lost when they brickrolled it for the initial release, that would have been exciting too, but this is It's the Remix, not It's the Remaster, so let's move on to what was actually changed in the mix. Overall, this remix is generally pretty faithful to the original mix. Unlike something like the radical reworks of A Momentary Lapse of Reason or Origin of Symmetry, there aren't any massive liberties taken with the arrangements of the songs on the record. There are additions, for sure, which we will come to, but overall the structure of the album is intact and definitely familiar. With this mix, the devil is in the details, how this general structure is completed, and that first detail is clarity. One result of the original rougher mix of this album is that it's not always the clearest album in the world. The guitars drive the album forward, but some of the other instruments slide under them, Mikey Way's bass and Matt Paselia's drums being the frequent victims here. This could be a result of the brickwalling we mentioned earlier, but another factor is that the guitars are mixed up pretty high on this record. However, on the remix, this isn't a problem. The drums and bass have been pulled up across the board, giving an all-new dimension to the album. There are layers to the playing I'd never heard before, such as a hi-hat building up towards the first chorus in You Know What They Do to Guys Like Us in Prison that's been brought up a little. Incidentally, you know what they do is vastly improved by this newfound clarity. On the original mix, the verse where Burt McCracken from The Used pops up is pretty hard to follow, but on the remix it's still chaotic, but a lot more understandable. It's details like this that began to sell me on the remix when I was first not completely convinced. The added clarity does give a better appreciation for the musicmanship on the record, and I'm never going to complain about hearing the details of the album better. That would be silly. Actually, let's keep talking about Mikey Way for a second, because something that was immediately clear to me is that the tone of the bass guitar has been massively altered for this mix. On the original, it sounds pretty good when you can pull it out of the mix, but on the remix, it's been opened up. The treble end of the bass tone has been turned up, capturing a lot more of the detail of Mikey's playing, as well as accentuating some of the distortion the bass has run through. This is no more obvious than in the intro of Give 'Em Hell Kid, where the bass stands more or less alone. To my ear, this is a much better bass tone for this album. It's clearer, but none of the bite of the album is sacrificed for that clarity. This clarity extends to the equalization of the guitars as well. This one, I admit, I didn't quite detect until doing one-to-one comparisons of the mixes, but the guitars have had their frequencies rebalanced to open them up a bit. The guitars on the original mix might sound louder, but their frequencies are a fair bit thinner. Here they've been opened up, so you can hear more of both the highs and the lows of the guitar tones. Again, this is something I didn't largely pick up until I was doing comparisons myself, though even on a first listen, the guitar crunches on To The End sounded beefier in the remix than they did originally. Beefier. Yeah, this is the in-depth mix analysis you come back to this series for.
He calls the mansion not a house but a tomb. He's always choking from the stench and the fume.
Overall, the album is much clearer and dynamic than on the original. The highs and lows are both expanded. The instruments are all much more distinct from one another, as opposed to the original mix where there isn't as much separation. It's a really exciting listen. This on its own makes a massive difference. Despite not heaps being changed in terms of arrangement, you could pick any song in this album and compare the mixes, and they'll feel very different to each other. However, there are occasions when things are added, giving something new to the listener. The first obvious additions come on Give 'Em Hell Kid, both in the intro and in the outro. Already the change in bass tone changes this intro a fair bit, but they don't stop there. A vocal line from Gerard Way that was buried on the original is pulled way up into the foreground, yelling over the drums and bass as they build up. The vocals on the verses have also received new treatment. While both mixes pass these vocals through an equalizer to give them a sort of megaphone feeling, the frequency response of the equalizer has been updated, retaining the rough nature of the vocals while giving them a new flavor. Ugh, flavor, what the fuck am I talking about? Roll the clip, you'll hear what I mean. But they're not done with Give 'Em Hell yet. Oh no, some backing vocals are brought up from the back of the mix in the bridge, and the final chorus now has a Hammond organ in it, something that was not present at all on the original mix. Overall, it seems Give 'Em Hell is the song they gave the heaviest facelift to, though. As for the most part, the adjustments to the other songs are a lot less radical outside of the general cleanup. There are a couple of highlights though, such as an added synth in the chorus of The Ghost of You that makes the song feel that much more haunted. It's a subtle addition, but on top of the Hammond organ being made more clear, it really does add to the song. The same goes for the enhanced vocal clarity on this track. Now, Gerard Wade's vocals in the lead up to the final chorus are much easier to hear. This change is insane, by the way, because at first listen, I genuinely thought this was a different vocal take. But no, it's there in the original mix. It's just buried. So here's the million-dollar question. Does this remix work? Now the answer might seem an obvious yes. It's a hell of a lot clearer, there are fun little additions from time to time, this sounds like an undebatable success. But I have mentioned a couple of times I wasn't completely sold on this mix to begin with. Perhaps it's because my first exposure to it was listening to the remix of Helena on the walk from work, already tired and grumpy. But I will admit I was wondering why. Opinion definitely appears a little divided from my brief forays into fan discourse on this album. Some have been calling for a remaster of 3 Cheers for years, citing the heavy compression of the original as a massive problem. Others are underwhelmed by this new mix, feeling it's taken some of the character away from the album. The thing is, I sympathize with both sides. On the one hand, a mix that's far less compressed than the original definitely has a different character to it. It was this immediate change that threw me off when I listened to Helena. But the fact that the original mix is somewhat unclear does hamper the album. The bass, drums, and occasionally backing vocals being obscured by the guitar mixing and the compression does work against Three Cheers in places. Having a version where you can really hear more of the intricacies of these parts is pretty welcome. To make my point clearer, let's take the final and my favorite track on the album, I Never Told You What I Do for a Living. My initial reaction to this mix was disappointment, honestly. There is a riff about halfway through the song that on the original mix is like a sonic kick to the head. On the new mix, with the drums and bass being brought up, the entrance of this riff isn't as violent. At first, this annoyed me. This is what I came to the song for. But in better listening conditions, not surrounded by traffic on a walk home, I listened to it again, and suddenly I saw the vision. Here, the kick in the head is brought by everyone. Not just the guitars, but by the furious drumming and the nastier bass tone. It's so much more balanced. This listen carried me onto the finale of the song, and of the album. On the original, the heavy compression squashes this finale somewhat. But on the remix, it rings out with all the sad fury that the song intends. There's no question of it in my mind. This song is infinitely improved by the remix in the end. When I wasn't sure about this remix still, I said to a friend that they'd polished Three Cheers, robbing it of the grit that attracts me to this album, but this is just not true. It's clearer, yes, but the raw ferocity of the original album is still preserved. I'd even argue it's enhanced in places by the improved bass tone and the increased frequency range on the guitars. Being able to hear more of the details in that guitar tone, I think, underlines the grunge of it all. It's not like they'd done a Danger Days number on the album and made it more radio-friendly. That would have been annoying, and I'm saying this as someone who loves Danger Days. This remix of Three Cheers, I think, marks a massive success for the band. It brings the album to life all over again while being faithful to what made it work in the first place. If you remember the episode of this series on R.E.M's Monster, you'll remember I said I wish that remix was more faithful to the character of the original while enhancing clarity. This remix of Three Cheers is a pretty good reference to what exactly I meant there. I think we should encourage MCR to do this again even. The Black Parade and Danger Days are undeniable rippers, but they are also victims of the loudness war to some extent. The Black Parade turns 20 next year, which, Jesus Christ. At the very least, a remaster of the album to put some dynamic range back into the record would be welcome, if not a full remix. The same applies to Danger Days. But which mix do I prefer? In all honesty, the new one. But in writing this video, I've listened to both mixes a fair bit. And the thing is, on the day-to-day, I could go with either one. But what do you think? Which mix do you prefer and why? Let me know in the comments, and in the meantime, like, sub, ring bell, give me all your poison and your pills, and I'll see you next time.